It may be the shortest intro in YouTube history, but that's okay. Welcome to Comic Art Convo. It's Saturday. It's the 29th of April. Oh my gosh, can you believe that already? We are almost in the fifth month of 2023. They say that time goes by quicker as you get older, and I guess that means I'm really getting old because time is flying. But let's bring in my co-host here for this wonderful show today. You know him as James. You may also know him as Sequential Treasures. Hey, James, how you doing today?
Salutations, everybody. Doing good, doing good. Got a great show here for you. I know you're all excited. It's another Comic Art Convo. And so to the chat, though, I have just one simple question for you. Just one simple question.
Are you going to stir stuff up already?
Dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Of course, that is from the. Is that from the Warriors soundtrack? Isn't that from the Warriors?
Yes, from the Warriors.
Yeah. Oh man, that was like
Aaron, just for you because I know the campaign is ending soon. Look what I'm representing today.
There it is, Wraith of God. I love that. Thank you so much. Get the. I have to be careful. I don't want to like. Because I'm on streams, 4 or 5 times a week, and it's like I don't want to wear my shirts every single time because I don't want to wear them out, because they're so cool. I want to save them for special occasions. So I wait till I close out the Wraith of God #1 second print campaign, which will be coming up in about 4 days. But and then I wear them for conventions. I got to save them. So. But anyway, thank you for representing. Appreciate that. Let's take a quick look in the chat here before we get going. Leg Kick is here because, of course, Leg Kick is almost always here. Zombie Boy, Kevin Wolf. He's already telling us before we even start. He says, don't forget the Gil Kane annuals and specials for DC in the early 80s. Superman DC presents Sword of the Atom. Wow. Well, we can only pick so many, right? So...
I picked my top 5 for everybody. And unlike in other past ones, these are my true top 5 from 5 to 1. It's going to go in that order. So my very top 5 favorite annuals of all time.
I cheated a little, but we'll get into that later because I'm a bit of a cheater. But her and the Steadfast is here. Unhinged, of course, spreading love and good cheer wherever he goes. Henry Jeremick. What is he talking about here? Simonson. He says he's actually more interested in the chat's favorite annuals than ours. What? I ought to kick you out of here, Henry, for saying that. Wiley Draws is here. Marcus Killigrew, of course. Thanks for joining us. Glitch. Heidi Mealy. That sounds so familiar. It's like I know that name. Tech Zombies is here. Who else we got there? Anybody new? Holder 6480 is here. Peter Felter Bush is here. Repairman Jack, of course, and Blue Boy. Hail, both of you. Love this show. And we love you, Blue Boy. Thanks, all of you, for joining us.
Yes, Henry. I only my top 5. I wanted to try to keep the show from getting super, super long by going into a whole bunch of stuff. So if you're going to try to trim it down to 5 so we can try to get it within like the hour and a half, 2-hour period that we normally do. Because I know Aaron has stuff to do and I have stuff to do. So you got only so much time, guys.
That's right. And I'm not even going to say mine are my top 5. I'm just going to say they're 5. No, they're it's hard to rank sometimes, but I have some ones that were memorable for me for certain reasons. So that's why I chose them. But enough about me, James. Let's you want to get into this and take a look at your list? And
let's do it.
Okay, I'm going to go with #1 here because it says #1.
I numbered them in order to show them, but this is the number 5, my 5th favorite annual of all time.
Okay, but it's #1 to show, but it's #5 in your heart. Drum roll, please. Yes. There it is. The 1995 Year 1 Catwoman annual. Why this one?
Yes, Catwoman annual 2. I liked it because it was a nice way of portraying the character's origins. It brought so much together that was like sort of piecemeal. You have the the Mindy Newell miniseries from '89. You had her appearance in Batman Year One. You had all these little bits and pieces all over the place. And what this does, it kind of congeals it all together and creates a brand new foe for her. You can see right in the background, Hellhound is her like opposite. Like, Spider-Man's got the Green Goblin, Superman has Lex Luthor, Batman has the Joker. Well, now Catwoman has Hellhound, and that's kind of how I liked how they brought all the aspects together into one cohesive story this way. And it's just a great character study of the character of Catwoman.
And Jim Balent, this is back in the Balent days, so this is early on when she first got her.
Yes, he did. But he only did breakdowns here. He didn't do full pencils. The inks are by Jim Hodgkins, which really brought a nice texture that you don't normally see on balanced stuff. And it's written by Jordan Gorfinkel, aka Gorf, from the editorship of the Batman titles at the time. So, yeah, like I said, I just love how he brought all these various aspects from other appearances and all her other history all together in just a one solid story. And like, to me, like, this is the Catwoman origin, is this annual.
I've got a story about Gorfinkel. Maybe I'll use it for my con story.
See, and this is here, this page right here I showed. This is where we kind of get the whole thing of she was out there being runs across the guy down here. You see in the last panel, that's Hellhound before he becomes Hellhound, and she messes up an initiation he's going for in this sect of this martial arts ninja type group. And she follows him back after he beats her up. He follows him back to where he went, and she meets the master here. And he comes out and she asks, he goes, what is it you're looking for? And she goes, why are you coming here? What is it you want? And she goes, I'm looking for knowledge. And that's what she says. And then she becomes a part of the group. And you can see here from the reaction here that the guy does not care to like it. He goes, I'm in. I think I've made my first enemy for life. Just that look on his face. And you see, this is what I'm talking about. This is this is the whole new part of the origin that you never knew before. So when we've seen Catwoman fight, and you wonder, how is she so quick and agile? And this is part of why that is. You learn where she learned some of her skills in her fighting techniques and whatnot. And I like that. It's an aspect that never got a lot of play in any appearance they talked about her with, but this here did. And I like that about it. Again, it just well-rounded the character in a way that I had not seen done before.
Now, do you know off the top of your head, is this the first time they gave us like the secret origin of Catwoman, or is this like a retelling of something that was done earlier?
It's kind of a mixture of both. If you read through the story, you'll see elements from the 1989 Catwoman series by Mindy Newell is in here. You'll see aspects of other little bits and pieces from other places that's in here, but it all brings it together, and it uses as the go through is her training here with this martial arts master. Is sort of like the key that runs through it that ties it all together. And that's why I liked it. It kind of brought everything together all in one cohesive whole in a way that had never been done before for the character.
Well, it's always nice when they actually use annuals to do like a story of interest rather than just filler,
Yes. And then right here, this is an classic example of what I was talking about, how they brought something in. If you guys remember Year One with Batman, there's that scene in Part 3 where he's at the site of a crime, and then all of a sudden all the bats come flying out, and here comes Batman running out with the bats, and people are like, oh God, he's a supernatural being and all this stuff. That's what she's got here, but she even knows. She goes, oh my God, it's a supersized bat. He's flying, or is he? Again, she knows he's injured. You see, and again, this kind of scene happened, and I liked the art because again, you can still tell it's balanced. But with Hodgkin's inking, he gives sort of a Mazzucchelli feel to this scene, which is the guy who did Year One. So I like how they kind of made the art style sort of fit the time period in which stuff is being told. And I like that about it a lot too.
No, that is that's a very good point. You can see the Richard Bonacar. Hello, Richard. He says, hello, hot dudes. You can see the Mazzucchelli sort of influence there, but you're still getting the
I do agree with Glitch. The third panel and the fourth panel, the last two panels, that's the real where you see them. That's where you really see the Mazzucchelli feel in the work.
Yeah,
is in those last two panels.
Yeah. What year was this?
1995.
Oh my gosh.
And this was again, this is back in the time in the 90s. You know how they did all the annuals all themed, and so every annual was a Year One when they did it in '95, DC in '95, all year one annuals, and of all of them, Catwoman, that was my favorite one because, like I said, it brought all the disparate parts of her past together. And then I said, use the run through of Hellhound and the master she learned from as the sort of like the binding agent to tie it all together. And to me, it's like this is the perfect origin of Catwoman. This and Catwoman Zero. You read those two books, that is the origin of Catwoman.
Excellent. You know, it's funny, in '95, that was my post Malibu days. So I would have thought that, you know, as I was still breaking into the mainstream in some ways, I would have ended up with more annual work in that period of time. I did some annual work in the early '90s, but really nothing until much later. So that's interesting. I mean, I was just kind of a sidebar, but okay, let's take a look at your second choice here, which is actually your fourth favorite of all time.
All-time favorite.
Now, I got some questions about this, but you'll probably answer them. So I will just let you go ahead and tell us about this.
Incredible Hulk Annual number 13 by one of my personal favorite writers, Bill Mantlo, art by Alan Kupperberg and Jerry Talaoc, which is a very strange combination if you know their styles. You wouldn't think they'd mesh very well, but they actually do pretty good in this. And this is during the time when the Hulk was off Earth after, you know, he had, Banner had taken over control, and then he lost control, and then they sent him off the Earth because he was too much of a danger, and he was on the crossroads to try to find a new world that he could survive in. And this is the annual that takes place during the Crossroads saga. And, you know, even though it's tied into that bigger arc, as a standalone story, it works very well. And I loved this story. It's got a lot of heart. It's got a lot of you know, emotion behind it. You know, you wouldn't expect that in a Hulk book, you know, because a Hulk smash, especially a Hulk at this time who was like much more of a savage beast. You would expect there not to be anything like that, but yet Mantlo does that in here, and I really just love the way he portrayed the Hulk's character during this period.
Who's the artist on this?
Alan Kupperberg.
Was it really? Because it looks.
The cover is by Chris Warner. That's Chris Warner cover.
Oh, is that Warner?
That's
Chris I was wondering that signature. That's right. That's Chris's signature. I was wondering about that. It looks a little goldenish in his take on the Hulk, though. To me,
well, I figured out of all the ones I gave you from my selection, I figured this would be the one you would like the most because, well, what's right on the front cover? A monster. So
a monster, a big old Godzilla-like monster. Look at that thing, the big old foot coming down. I've always really liked Chris's stuff, and he didn't do enough of it. But I was wondering who did the cover because I was looking at that signature and, God, I know that signature, but I couldn't remember whose it was. And sure enough, Chris Warner. But he didn't do the insides, just the cover.
Nope, the insides are done by Alan Kupperberg and Jerry Talaoc, one of the Filipino artists. Like I said, you wouldn't think their styles would mesh well, but yet, as you're going to see here, look at how well that works out. It's really nice. And what the story is the Hulk goes to this world, and he's hungry. He's like, you know, he's like been going for days, trying to go into all these different, you know, portals, trying to find somewhere to go. He sees this one world where there's food. He goes in to eat it, but the food is like poisonous to him. And what happens is, as you can see on his back, this little creature looks like a spine attaches itself to him, and then the Hulk is able to survive on that planet. But as you can see here in the beginning, the Hulk is not very happy with the arrangement. You know, the savage beast does not really care so much about it. You know, it tells him, he goes, your act of killing my host destroyed not only a relationship that ensured my mobility, but also robbed me of a friend from whom I had grown accustomed to provide. Rage not, Hulk. We are one. Your attempts to detach me will only cause you pain, and there is no need. We are one. Without each other, the other would die. You know, so that's how it works on this planet. Is there's like a symbiosis between these creatures and the other life forms on the planet, because without them working together, they can't eat because the food's poisonous. You know, stuff will hurt the other animals if they were to like get around it. And so these creatures help them survive while they get from themselves sustenance from them, and you know, the companionship. And it's just really great. Like I said, a lot of heart in this story compared to a lot of, and you wouldn't expect that from a Savage Hulk type of thing here.
Did you ever see the movie The Tingler with Vincent Price?
Yes.
That's a thing attached to his back. That was the first thing I thought of, was like, this is
yes.
like the Tingler. Where's VP at?
And like I said, you can see here at first the Hulk is not very receptive to this, but as time goes on, he becomes more and more receptive. And then what happens is a scene where there's a call sent out to the alien creatures, the ones that are attacked, and they call all of them in because they find that the guy's this one's bonding with the Hulk is a problem, because the Hulk is the only one of his kind on this planet. There is no other animal he can go to like the Hulk, and so they want them to disengage. And this creature, his name is Sim, doesn't want to do it, and neither does the Hulk. And there's a quick little brief battle where the Hulk fights some of the animals and stuff because they try to stop him, and he just leaps away. And then Sim tells me, he goes, I've had this dream, to be the first of my species to see the sky. Because they were like crawling on their bellies, like snakes. They didn't really get to see what was above. And so the Hulk, in friendship, he climbs this mountain. It's like a snowstorm is coming down. The Hulk goes and hides in a cave, trying to keep warm and stuff. And because he wants to get him up above the clouds so that he can see the sky. And right here is the big scene where he tells him, I detached myself from you while you slept, Hulk, determined to lose myself in the snow. I realized you contained only enough energy to get yourself down the mountain. The energy I drew from you would certainly have meant your death. Perhaps you can find another like me below. It's too late. Hulk, after I left you painstakingly, I crawled from the cave, crawled like my ancient ancestors on my belly to the ground. Then I stopped crawling and I sensed a brightness above and about me. Realizing that the snows had at last stopped, I raised my eyes heavenward, and thanks to you, my friend, became the first of my species to gaze upon the stars. And then the Hulk holds him up so he can see it even better, and that's when he dies.
Wow, I'm getting a little misty right now.
Yes.
Now
it was a bond the Hulk didn't want at first, but then it became important to him, and in the end he loses his friend, which then again triggers the spell that Doctor Strange put on him, so that whenever the Hulk would feel unsatisfied on a world, it would send him back to the crossroads, and he goes back to the crossroads at the end because he's no longer satisfied here because his friend is gone. It's a story of loss. It's a story of friendship. It's a story of coming together and bonding. I mean, it's just a great heartfelt story. Again, with the Savage Hulk. It's not even like the Hulk Smash Hulk or anything like that, or the Intelligent Hulk. No, this is like Savage Hulk. And it's a beautiful story. And like I said, this is the kind of thing Mantlo did. It's why people have called him, saying he was the writer who gave any character's voice just right, and he does that here with the Hulk. And again, it's one of my all-time favorite annuals.
Yeah, I'm a big Bill Mantlo fan. I always liked his work. What year was this?
84.
84. Okay, so we're going back a little bit. Now this was before you started like reading comics regularly, right? So did you discover?
Yes, this is one I got, as a back issue much later. Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. All right. This is going to be your third choice.
Now we're in the top three.
Top three, baby.
Detective Comics Annual 4 by Louise Simonson and Tom Grindberg from 1991.
Oh,
now this
Louise.
is a tie-in to that storyline Armageddon 2001. But the way Simonson approached this, she didn't do it the way a lot of others did, where like the whole thread with Wave Rider kind of went throughout the whole story. She bookended it. The first page has Wave Rider, and the last page has Wave Rider, and then in between is just a story. So if you took out those first and last pages, it's almost like it's a story on its own. And in this story, what happens is Batman faces Ra's al Ghul for the last time, and Ra's al Ghul dies, and Batman becomes like, I won't say invalid, but like he becomes laid up. He cannot be Batman anymore. It's like kind of like a Nightfall thing. He's broken. He can't be Batman. And at the time, Tim Drake is Robin. But again, this takes place a little bit in the future because it's saying it's 2001, and so it's like in the future. So Tim's older, and he decides there needs to be a Batman. There has to be a Batman. So he takes on the persona, and then while he's out one night, he gets killed, and this spurs Bruce on to get himself back into shape, and he even creates like technology to help himself so he can move around to do it. And right here you can see in this page we're about to show here. This is what happens when Bruce finds out what happened to Tim. He goes, "It's Tim, isn't it? You knew, or at least suspected what was going on. Why didn't you tell me? You conspired with him to keep it from me. Yes, we conspired. And you know what, Master Bruce? It was easy. The world's greatest detective, and you didn't know, you didn't want to know. And Tim said that the city needed Batman. He was a grown man. He did what he thought was right. How could I stop him when I agreed with him? I should have known. I should have done something. I'm going to get whoever killed him, Alfred. But I've made so many enemies. Which one can it be? See, that's now he's driven in a new way, whereas before it was his parents' death that drives him. Now he's being driven back in because of Tim's death, and he's going to find out who was the person responsible for his death. But yeah, I've got so many enemies. Who can it be? And so he gets himself back into condition. He creates a suit that has like technological, like, almost like cyborg power. So he's even more powerful than before. And he goes on a tear through the city trying to find out who it is. Eventually he does. And this is who it is. But the next page will tell you who is actually the one who did it.
This art style, this Tom Grinberg is the artist here, but very you can see his Neil Adams influence in this.
Definitely Neil Adams influence. But again, it's a Ra's al Ghul story, basically. So I mean, of course, who else would you want to emulate doing Ra's al Ghul than Neil Adams himself? Yep. And here it is. This is after he's been hurt and injured again, even with his new suit. And then out from the shadows comes Talia. And he goes, "Beloved, Talia, why? Did you blame me for your father's death? No, beloved. I have ordered this because I love you. Love me. And because Ra's chose you as his successor. My Batman. He fought to test and toughen you. If he ever lost you, Ra's planned that you would succeed him and become the new Ra's al Ghul. Up there, beloved, lies the Lazarus pit. Up there lies your destiny. Even now, my servants have come to take you where you will be restored." She is the one who killed Tim Drake. At first, she did it because she thought it was him. She thought it was him out there doing it. And then they found out, wait, it's not him. It's Tim Drake, and he got killed. So then they used that to draw Bruce back out, because the whole plan was she was following her father's desires and making Bruce the next successor of the Ra's al Ghul mantle. And so
now you've got me on the edge of my seat. What did he do?
So she's going to take him in to the Lazarus pit, because you can see he's broken pretty badly here. There's nothing he can do, and he doesn't want this. He's telling her, "I don't want to do this," and she goes, "Well, you have no choice." He goes, "If you love me, you wouldn't do this." He goes, "I'm doing it because I love you, and because this must be." And so what he does is he short circuits his suit as they lower him into the Lazarus pit, and it explodes and kills him and her and everybody. So it ends with like his death and her death. Everything is ended in this. And it's just like, oh, wow, I did not see that coming. I did not see that end happening. And it's just, and again, to me, this is Grindberg's his greatest work. I've seen a lot of his stuff over the years. To me, he never looked better than he did on this annual, doing this Neil Adams inspired style. It's just beautiful work. It's a beautiful story. It's called Succession. That's the name of the story. And it's about, because you got the succession of Bruce to Tim being Batman, and you got the succession of she wants him to be the new Ra's al Ghul. So it's all about all of this. And it's all in the backup of Wave Rider trying to find out who's going to become Monarch. And he can see from this, it's not Batman, because even when he had the chance to become something like that, when he could have become the new Ra's al Ghul, he chose to end his own life rather than to become that. And so he knows he's not the one. So
this is kind of like an Elseworlds type story then.
It is kind of an Elseworlds, but it's less like, of a improbability and more of a possibility. Like that could be the future. That could be how things would play out in the future. And again, I just love it, because again, you don't even need the 2001 aspect of the story. You just need the story set sometime in a little bit in the future, and it's just a beautiful, well-told story. Louise Simonson, another great writer. She did excellent here. I don't know why she didn't do more Batman work based on this, because man, she could really do some good Batman stuff.
Wheezy is just a really, really top-notch writer. I loved all the stuff that she did. Either Marvel or DC. I was a big X Factor fan because of her stories. So yeah, I didn't realize she had written any Batman stuff. That's really interesting.
Yeah, like I said, you don't even really need to pay attention to the whole 2001 Armageddon stuff. All you need to do is this story could be read on its own. If you just take the first page and the last page, you'll sort of tear them out and just ignore them. This is like a story all on its own, and it's beautifully done. To me, this is one of my top 10 favorite Batman stories.
I love Kevin Thomas. I swear every Talia story has her being more nuts than her dad. To think Bruce stuck his eggs in that basket. Oh my goodness.
Thank you, Frankie. Thank you, Frankie. Yes, Louise Simonson wrote X Factor, I think, from issue number 9 to I think like 64. That was her run. So like a 4.5 year run. Yes, she wrote X Factor quite a long time. She wrote it for the entire time that Walt was drawing it. So
and
then even a little bit after that.
That was great stuff, man. Yeah, I quit buying it after Simonson quit drawing it, and that's when I started picking it up. And then I went back and got the earlier issues that were Silvestri, wasn't it?
Silvestri, I think there was one in there with Terry Shoemaker and a few others, but yeah.
Yeah. No, she was terrific, and she's so nice. Such a nice person. Her and Walter both.
Yeah, but like I said, reading that story to me was like, man, I'd like to see Louise Simonson write more Batman stuff. That was an excellent story.
Okay, so that was 3. So here we go with 2, I think, because you actually sent me the pages, the interior pages for this before you sent the cover.
Yeah, my computer screwed it up somehow. I don't know why it did that, but
make sure. Okay. All right. So then this is. Now I've never read this annual, but it's got everything in it that would make me want to read it.
Uncanny X-Men Annual number 11 by Chris Claremont, Alan Davis, and Paul Neary. The guys who bring us a year later would bring us Excalibur.
Yep, I loved Excalibur.
And as you can see here in the background, Megan and Captain Britain are there. So you got some of the members of the team right there. I love this annual. It's again just like with the Catwoman, where the Catwoman focused on the origin of the character. This feels more like character studies of the characters, because you learn about them through their hopes and their dreams, because that's what this all boils down to. What happens is this character named Horde, you see him right here on the front. He collects the X-Men and takes them to this citadel, and he wants them to go in and retrieve this gem for him so he can become even more powerful. And his whole thing is, if you don't do it, I'll destroy your Earth, and I can do it. And so the X-Men have to go in, and he goes, because there are booby traps in this citadel, and that's why he's sending in the X-Men to do it. Rather than risk himself, I'll risk you. And that's how I'm going to do this. And so the X-Men feel they got no choice. They go in to try to get this gem for him, because they want to save the Earth. And the way the booby traps work is the citadel reads your mind and your heart and your soul, and kind of offers you your heart's desire. And you have to try to resist that to go on, or you fall to the wayside and now you become part of the citadel. And as you can see from this next page here that they're going to show,
this is some terrific artwork. I love Alan Davis, man. Is that Dazzler?
This is Dazzler's. This is Dazzler's story. Now, she had one where hers I thought was the most interesting, because there's a page before this one too. She has 3 options. She could choose to be a lawyer, she could choose to be, as you see here, a rock star, or she can choose to be as a homeless person. These are her choices of how she feels inside. And she even says it, someone help me, tell me which is best. Which do I choose? It's up to me. No one to depend on, no one to blame but myself. If I never take a risk, I'll never have to worry about making a mistake, failing, being hurt. There's safety in defeat, luxury in self-pity. Is that what I really want? And that's the one she chooses. She chooses to be the homeless person, so that then she no longer has any responsibility put upon her by anybody else. No one's counting on her for anything. She doesn't have to worry about failing at anything. I've escaped all responsibility, and that was her heart's desire, because the pressures of being a hero, the pressures of being a rock star, the pressure of all this stuff that's been on her, she doesn't like it, and so she opts to go for her heart's desire of a life with no responsibility, with no pressure, with no expectations. And all throughout all of this, each character kind of gets put into their own little option that way. Like, Havoc's is he just sort of disappears into the ether of space. Like his power is so powerful in him, that power he has. He just wishes he just let it all go, and it does, and he just disappears into nothingness. Now here we are at the end. The only one, of course, who survives to make it to the gem is Wolverine, of course.
Of course.
And what happens is Horde kills Wolverine, but a single drop of Wolverine's blood hits the gem and completely regenerates his body. And as a result of that, Horde loses all his power here. And you can see he just turns to dust. Meanwhile, Wolverine is enthralled with all of this. And I love this. This is a great thing right here. He goes, was this how Jean Grey felt when she became Phoenix? I can sense everything, every particle of matter, every burst of energy, every living thing in all creation, the universe, mine to do with as I wish. I can touch every soul with an awareness of honor, decency, courage. I can transform, shape, create, heal, destroy. Stop. Before I start, I'm talking like God, only I ain't God. That was Horde's trip, and he rejects the power. And then that causes the gem to explode, and everything reverts back to where it was. The X-Men are back on Earth, and their mansion, and Horde is done. And at the end, the X-Men kind of like, what happened? Was it all a dream? And they walk in to see Wolverine, and he's standing there like this in costume, holding on to a samurai sword, sitting there like a warrior, just like silently watching over everybody. And that's how the story ends. And it's just the X-Men saved not just the Earth but the universe because because Wolverine rejected the power of godhood.
This is
great study into all these different characters.
When Claremont was like really at his peak, and then you have Alan Davis really at his peak. I mean, this is really great stuff, great comics. And Past Master Dan in there said that Neary, he says Neary is like Adams, but Alan Davis Neil Adams was a huge influence on Alan Davis. But he had his own take on it, and there's very few guys. He's very much like John Byrne.
I like Danky
where everything
Frankie's
he drew you like.
I like Danky Frankie's point right here. Every great story is a Christian story if you know what to look for.
Every great story is a Christian story if you know what to look for. Well, yeah, that's probably. I mean, there's probably some truth in that too, isn't there?
Yeah. Like I said, to me, this is like one of the best X-Men stories. And like I said, my second of all the annuals I've ever read. This is my second favorite of all of them.
It's interesting that they got Davis to do this right before Excalibur because I'm trying to think, he was a pretty big deal at that point before they did Excalibur, or did he become a big deal after Excalibur? I can't remember.
I think he was kind of a deal before Excalibur, but I think Excalibur just threw him into the stratosphere after that. He became like not just a great artist, but like Alan Davis.
Oh, it's kind of interesting because Art Adams did a lot of annuals too, probably because the deadlines were easier and, but it's always interesting because usually when you picked up annuals, I shouldn't say usually, but a lot of times when you picked up annuals, they were, beginning artists or whatever, and whoever they could get to do the annual because no one wanted to do the annuals. They wanted to do the main books. And so whenever you find an annual that has a really top-notch writer or artist on it, it's a real gem. And this is, man.
Well, I kind of agree with Marcus Killigrew here. I think in some ways Alan Davis is better than Adams. And, I kind of agree. I mean, I like Neil Adams stuff. You just saw in the previous one that Grindberg doing a Neil Adams style. I liked it. But if you ask me to choose, who do you prefer, Adams or Davis? I'm probably going to pick Davis. I love Alan Davis's work. I mean, he is, to me, one of the premier comic artists of all time. I mean, you don't get much better than Alan Davis.
No, and Alan Davis always made the way he draws, and this is kind of the point I was trying to make about Byrne a little bit earlier, was that he draws in a way that you want comics to look. There's a really sort of a comfortability about Alan Davis's work and Byrne's that no matter what book you put him on, you're going to like it. It's just got really
like a
high
familiarity. A familiarity. Like,
yes.
This is how comics are supposed to be. This is how they're supposed to look.
Right. I totally agree with that. And I miss seeing Alan Davis's work, because he was, I'd pick up anything he worked on. I even picked up that
Henry Jeremic. Maybe I would go with what Henry Jeremic says right here at the point right here. Maybe that's what I would think. That's how I would say.
I don't know if you could say Davis is more dynamic than Adams. He's a better Neil. I would say that Davis his storytelling is more concise. Neil Adams always got a little crazy, right? Because he was always trying new things, and sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't. But Davis was more steady. He was more consistent. But both of them terrific artists.
I think what it is too is like when you look at Neil stuff, maybe not the very early stuff he did, but like the much later on, there's a hardness to Neil's stuff, like a sharper line, a darker shadow. Whereas Alan Davis's stuff, no matter where it is, from the beginning to the end, it's like a softness to it. But yet it never becomes like, I would say effeminate or anything like that. But like look at the Wolverine shot in here of him with the hands out. I mean, look at the smoothness in that image. That's really where he stands out, is like getting that smoothness and yet never losing sight of what he's actually drawing when he's doing that.
So Davis just recently did an Avengers miniseries? Well, that's typical me not paying attention to what's going on in Maine. I didn't pay attention to what was going on when I was working in mainstream comics.
Wiley Draws here says, weird that Davis never had a long run on a top tier title. Yeah, well, I think probably it might be because of himself. I think maybe his style demands a certain level of time. And when you're doing the monthly grind, it's kind of hard. That's why you see Alan Davis doing like, a 2 or 3 issue storyline and then he's gone, or he does an annual like this and then that's it. He can take more time doing that stuff. Whereas if he was on a monthly grind, it's kind of hard. Like I think I even saw it on Excalibur a little bit, like towards the end when he was working on it, it looked a little rougher than the stuff earlier in the run when he had more time. And so you can kind of see, I think that's probably why you never saw him being on a top tier book for a long period of time, is it just his style isn't conducive to that grind of a monthly schedule.
Well, and Excalibur was a pretty hot book. Once it, they started doing that, because it was the new X-Men book on the block, and it had some Nightcrawler was in it, and of course Captain Britain, and they had some good
Alan
characters
Davis seems
in
to
it,
have
but
a
also
soft spot for Captain Britain.
When Alan Davis
he's a Brit.
When Alan Davis drew him, I thought he was pretty freaking cool. But yeah, and I think Davis, a lot of guys, and I found myself doing this, is, he did Clandestine, right? It's so much easier to get something done. If you have some name value, it's so much easier to get something done at a big company, instead of saying, hey, I want to do Spider-Man, because so many people have to have their finger in the pie, so to speak, of Spider-Man. If you go to them with something off the radar, a lot of times they'll just kind of let you do what you want to do. And my guess is, instead of, he did that Killraven miniseries, if you remember that, in the early 2000s, with Killraven in that 70s outfit, that looked like a wrestling outfit or something.
No, ladies man 727. No, I believe Shane would probably love it if they were related, but I do not think that Shane Davis and Alan Davis are related. I do not believe so.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. But I think guys sometimes will gravitate towards like B-list characters because they know they're going to get less editorial interference by working on them. So that could have been his case. I don't know that's for sure with him, but I definitely know it was the case with me.
Jojo Kun Comics, he calls it out right here. He goes, he loved his Excalibur, best artist on Megan and Captain Britain, which again, Megan and Captain Britain were in this annual as well. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, anybody else doing justice to those characters outside of Alan Davis.
Where to go here? Aaron, the Thanos crossover between Marvel 2 and 1 and Avengers Finals is obviously the best. That's a great one. I love that, the Jim Starlin. Well,
it's funny you bring up that name, because now we're getting to my all-time favorite comic annual ever.
All right, hang on a second.
Let me answer. That person is involved in it. Yes.
Let's answer this real quick. Did it work against Davis being overseas? In those days, he couldn't be in the office to lobby. I don't think so. I mean, if you were great, you were great, and they didn't care. There was several British artists and writers that were kind of in comics at that time that were doing well. But inner office politics can never be ignored because that's always a thing. And I don't know what was going on between him and editorial at that time. So it could have been, but it seems unlikely unless he was a type of personality that maybe was problematic to work with for some people. And I don't know that to be true. I've never heard that.
I've never. That's the thing too. All the stuff, all the shows I've been to, all the people I've talked to, I've never heard anyone say anything negative about Alan Davis. Like, oh, not that guy.
No. So you got to think that some of it had to do with, like you said, his speed. You know, how much time and effort but how much time he had to put into a certain title, and then could he keep up, or did he even want to try and keep up? And you know, there's a lot of factors that go into that stuff. Okay, let's take a look at this. Your number one,
my all-time favorite annual of all annuals.
There it is.
Adventures of Superman annual number 1 from 1987, from a storyline called Union.
I just made it disappear. I didn't mean to do that. Hang on. Hold that thought. It's coming back. All right, let's try that again.
There it is. By Jim Starlin, Dan Jurgens, and Steve Montanaro. This is my all-time favorite annual. It is a brilliant story. Again, just like Starlin did with that Batman story I did, the Batman 430, the Fatal Wish. This is kind of in the same vein where he took Superman and put him in a situation that's like outside the norm and like added textures to the character in a way you never would have expected. I love this story. It's to me one of the best Superman stories ever done. This was a great annual. This to me is like this is what annuals are supposed to be, a story like this.
So, okay, tell us a little bit about the story here. Why is this?
What happens is there's a town in North Dakota where all the people have disappeared, and the government has sent some troops and stuff in to try to find out what's going on, and they have disappeared. So they have no idea what's going on. And so if you go to this page right here, you can see that's when they bring in Superman.
All right. Let's bring it in. Let's bring in Superman then. There we go. Oh, little Ronnie Reagan action there.
And there it is. I love that too. A little insert of Ronald Reagan by Dan Jurgens there. And you can see Superman shows up and he goes, I still have to know who you sent into Trudeau. That's the name of the town. And he goes, 3 agents, chemical biology warfare unit, and a squad of Marines. What happened to them? We have no idea. We were in continuous radio contact with the Marines and the CWB defense units. Then they suddenly went off air and never came back on. Will you check it out for us? And he's like, of course. And then, Reagan coming in here goes, you understand we want this handled quietly. So, they don't want to cause panic of what's going on. And you can see Superman's reaction. So he's called in. So he goes to the town and he starts looking through stuff. You can see there's half-eaten food still on counters in restaurants, and cars are parked out in the middle of the street, with the engine still running. And the people it's just gone. It's an empty town. And it isn't until he goes into the sewers and he finds all this stuff. He finds tooth fillings and glasses and all this stuff stuff that people would have, but they don't have it now. It's like, what's going on? And that's when he gets attacked, as you saw on the cover, by this gelatinous green monster thing. And at first, he lets it take him in a way because he figures this creature might give me an idea of what's going on here. And he gets caught by it. And that's when we meet the Word Bringer, is the name of the character. He's an alien. And what this alien has done is he has removed the brains of all the people in this town, as well as the government guys that came in, and connected them all together as in union. And they're like these super brained people. It's what is it? The Eternals have the Unimind. That's kind of what this is. And this is what this alien does. He takes creatures and he puts their minds together, and he creates what he calls the Union. And Superman's the gelatinous creature, the green monster, that is the leftover, biological material of their bodies reconstituted. And so there's no putting them back. They're like this now, and there's no going back. Their bodies have been changed into this monster. So Superman fights the creature and he destroys it. The Wordbringer runs off and he escapes. And then he starts talking with some of the people in this union, and they tell him, he goes, we need your help to die. And you can just look at that second panel of the expression on his face. And he's like, because they're like, we can't live like this. You know, we don't want to live this way, but we need your help because, you know, we're just brains in a machine now. We can't, like, you know, pull the lever and end ourselves on the machine. You have to do it for us. You know, and they're telling this to him telepathically because they're minds. And he goes, I can't do that. I can't help you commit suicide. It's against everything I believe in. I'm sorry. And then so are we. And then they mind blast him. And then then the next page, Superman wakes up on the ground, like, what the heck? And the switch has been thrown. And all the brains are dead. And so they used the power of their collective union of mind power to force Superman's body to pull the lever so that they could die. And like at the very end of the story, he goes, you're the hero. You stopped the villain. You saved the planet. You gave some people, in pain what they really wanted. You are the hero. Now you stand among the ashes of your victory. And it's there's this final panel, like Superman just like this at the end, like he just, because he's just so overwrought. It's just so excellently done. Here is Superman living up to his heroic ideals, and yet he's being forced to do something he doesn't want to do against his own will. And again, it just Starlin is so masterful at this. It's like, the right to die versus living up to your ideals versus, the aliens' idea of what union should be, and all this bringing people together to work together, but not, in a way that we understand. All this stuff is all in there, and I just love it. It's like the greatest Superman story, of the era, and it's my all-time favorite annual. There's no, bar none, this is my favorite one.
That's a killer story. I love that, how they kind of took control of him and actually made, they committed suicide through him by controlling him to do what he wouldn't do otherwise. It's pretty amazing. And so those were all the brains of everybody in the town. So they were
all the townspeople plus all the military guys that heard were sent in after the people disappeared. They sent some units in, all those people too. So we're talking several hundred people.
That's interesting, because you would think in most instances they figure out a way to restore people's brains back to their bodies and everything would be okay. But this is kind of a dark turn there at the end that really might be unexpected, but that's killer stuff, man. I agree. That's because
again, the whole thing is, like you said, their bodies were all turned into that gelatinous green monster. It's like, so there's no going back. And I say, well, we can put your brains back in your bodies. Their bodies have been reconstituted. They're gone, and this is how they would have to live now forever if they didn't die. And it's like, and they didn't want that. It's like, we can't live this way. And Superman, but I can't kill you. And they're like, well, we're sorry. And then bang, they force him to do it anyway. Yes, Ellie Minoz. Yes, this is like a Twilight Zone episode. It is. It very much does have a Twilight Zone-ish feel to it. That's probably why I liked it so much.
Man, that's a heavy story, man. And it's funny. I always you always bring stuff in that I'm unaware of when we do these shows.
I believe this is the very first time Dan Jurgens draws Superman as well.
Really? So this would have been...
Dan is well known for being one of the premier Superman artists of like the 90s. But this issue, I believe, was his first turn at drawing the Man of Steel.
In 1987. So he was...
87, yes.
As I recall, Jurgens started off doing Green Arrow stuff. Took over on Grell's series. Which he did. Grell, of course, did the Longbow Hunters miniseries. They were all prestige format.
And before that, he was doing Booster Gold, his own little creation there, Booster Gold.
Oh, what did he do? Booster Gold prior to?
Yes, the first Booster Gold series. Yes, that was Dan Jurgens.
Well, get that. All right, those are good. Mine are all. You always pick stuff that you like. It's like deep thinking involved. Mine is always superficial. Man, I really like the art.
Well, speaking of superficial, Kevin Thomas right there gets really superficial.
Aaron had hair in 19. Yeah, I did. I had a lot of it. I never thought I was going to lose it, man. I was like Elvis. I had all this hair. But anyway,
okay. Yes, definitely. Dan style did change. If you look at this annual and then you look at like the stuff he did say during the death of Superman, you might think it was two different artists, but no, it is the same artist. Dan style definitely evolved over time.
Mm-hmm. Well, you always hope you're getting better, right? We start off at a certain level, and it's usually not a very good level, and then we just grow from there. Hopefully, if you're getting worse, there's probably something not quite right with that. Okay, I'm going to. I put down a bunch, and I'm going to maybe. And I'm not going to put that. I am going to show this real quick, although I've never read it, but it's so iconic. I was like, how do I not throw this up here? Simply because of the Stranko cover. This thing has been like ripped off, homaged so many times. And the really funny thing about this is that the Steranko face that he drew on the Hulk, they thought it was too scary or too intense or something, or too off model, and they had Marie Severin come in and draw his face and patch it over, Starlin's design, which I can only imagine. I've never asked him personally, but
that is
I would
sacrilege.
imagine probably pissed him off beyond belief.
That is sacrilege.
Yeah, but yeah, this was on my collector's list, and I was going to get it, but then when all that COVID money went into the comics industry the last 3 years, this thing went from being a $300 book to like a $1,200 book, and I was like, I'm not paying $1,200 for that. So we'll see if Joe Biden's economy pulls it back down into my price range again. But yeah, there it is. Marcus Killicrew said that was Marie Severin and Frank Giosha on the inside.
Giacoya, yeah.
Giacoya, excuse me, yeah. And so, but anyway, I don't own it. I've never read it, but I wanted to throw it up there simply because of the cover. All right, now this.
Oh wow, leg kick. That sucks. That sucks.
Mine was
one above that.
Missed it.
There it is.
Great choice. Mine was stolen, and oh, that does blow. And it usually happens when we don't have our stuff insured, right? It's like I had it insured for a while, then I took the insurance off, or I was thinking about getting insurance and I didn't, and then something happens. That stinks. Okay. Now, I'm going to say up front, I was not old enough to buy this when it came out, but this is probably the first annual I owned, and I was a Spider-Man collector as a kid, so I would always go back and get all the back issues and everything, and I picked this one up. I would never could find a 1 or a 2, the Ditko ones, but this one I was like, come on, Spider-Man fighting the Avengers, plus you've got some reprints of Doc Ock in there, and from Ditko. So it's kind of like, this is on my list simply because it was the first annual that I ever had in my possession and kind of understood what the purpose of an annual was. And it was, oh, look at it, 72 big pages for just 25 cents. I mean, who doesn't love, here's a little page from the inside. Who doesn't love Spider-Man joking around with the Avengers? Look at the whole gang's there. Looks like Don Heck, doesn't it? I think it was. Giant Man.
I love this. You mean the next test is a debate? Do not mock me, newcomer. Such action is most unwise. I love that. Thor not taking too kind to the humor.
Oh my gosh. I love how they're just like the Avengers. They're all hanging around the house in costume, waiting for their next big adventure. Oh my gosh, that's good stuff. But yeah, so that was like the first one I owned, so that's why that's on there. These are not any particular order, although I will show you probably my favorite all time. As I'll show that last, but now you just got lucky and put that in your
I figured you would have this one in there because it's Arthur Adams,
right? And it's got a vampire in it, and it's it's written by Byrne, drawn by Art Adams, and it's got a vampire in it. And I just thought it was really cool because the Superman story. I mean, Superman. he can't, his powers don't work against magic. And so you would, the vampire then, of course, is a metaphysical being.
Yeah, it's
so he's
supernatural. Basically, it's a supernatural. Superman's power does not work well against the supernatural. Yes.
Right. So Batman really had to save his butt in this one, which I found, greatly entertaining. And there's that scene where it's like this girl, she's a vampire blonde girl that lives like in the swamp, right? And Batman goes into her house. She thinks he's a vampire because he's dressed up like a bat, right? But then I think he uses God's name or something like that in some sort of.
He does something that a vampire would never do, and that
right.
She goes, "Wait, you're not a vampire."
How did you speak the forbidden name? And that's when she figures out that he's not a vampire after all, and things get dicey. But I really enjoyed this. I want to say this is probably 1988, wasn't it?
87.
87. And like I said,
same year as the Adventures of Superman annual. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
There was 3 annuals for Superman that year: Action Comics Annual 1, Superman Annual 1 from the Byrne series, and then Adventures of Superman Annual 1. Those all came out in the same year, and tier 2 of the 3 have been used as some of the best. So that's kind of funny how that year was like, just so big for Superman.
Well, it's interesting. The mid to late 80s were really kind of a great several years for comics. I mean, that's when the boom started getting steam, was in the late 80s, but there was some really good stuff going. I mean, McFarlane started on Spider-Man in about 88, 89. I think it was 88. And, so there was a lot of really kind of creative, good stuff going on there in the late 80s.
Yeah, you had you had Silvestri on the X-Men. You had, Byrne doing Superman, and, Aparo and Breyfogle doing Batman. I mean, it was a really great time.
And a lot of that stuff, there was some good annuals. There was that, it's not in my list, but there was that, was it the Mud Pack annual that had all the clay faces in it?
That's Secret Origins number 44. But that was another good one. A lot of great stuff in that period.
Yep.
It's probably my favorite. It's probably my favorite period of time. I'd say from like 85 to 90. To me, that is like the prime time best era of comics ever done for me, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's sort of when I got back into it as a collector, because I was in film school at that time, and we go to Golden Apple Comics all the time. And that's where I started, because when I read comics up to about 1980. And then, when I got my car, my focus has changed. But then about 85 to 88 is when I started reading again. And then, 89, 90, I was trying to break in. But I do remember fondly that period of time, and finding Killing Joke came out, in 88, I think. And, The Watchmen, and Watchmen was a little bit later than that, but there was just a lot of good stuff going on. So, okay, let me, I'm going to throw this up here just for fun. This is not in my top 5, but it is actually an annual that I drew. And this was, I think, other than this is my first superhero cover I did. I did some covers for when I was doing the humor stuff, but I did this was I think my first.
And it's the first appearance of Dream Killer.
It is.
Got to create that character, yes.
Man, if they only would put him in a movie, I might get a little bit of money. Patty Q says the FF Annual number 7 was my first magazine. Thank you for the $4.99, by the way, Patty. Appreciate that. Origin of Dr. Doom and the Battle of the Minds between him and Reed. I'm somewhat young, but the classics are tops. I agree. And we'll get to the more classic. Anyway, I just want to throw this up. It was by the way, bagged with a trading card inside. So I kind of felt like I did something special here, even though I really didn't. But that was.
I'll tell you, I toyed with the idea of using that cover for our background here, putting that cover as one of the ones in there. Like, no, that's too self-serving. No, we don't want to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, like I said, I'm showing more than 5, but I'm not showing any interiors. And some of these are just, I think, of note. Doggone it. All right. Well, I'm not going to show this because of my scans are terrible here. But I was going to bring up, of course, the Spider-Man Annual number 21, which is where Peter Parker and Mary Jane get married. My good friend Paul Ryan did the interiors on that. And I remember the thing
cover by Jazzy John.
Yeah. And there was 2 covers. There was him as Spider-Man.
There was the direct version with Peter and Mary Jane, and the newsstand version with Spider-Man and all the villains in the background.
Right, exactly. And I remember telling the guy that ran the comic shop that I, had my box in. I was like, dude, you got to give me a newsstand copy. And he goes, how am I supposed to get it? And I go to the store and pick one up for me. He did. So I had, I got both of those, but both the newsstand and the direct edition. But anyway, now this is kind of
Blackjack also called it for the one cover you did for the Darkhawk annual. Was like that was the year 93 where every annual introduced a new character. That's why I was bagged with a trading card, because the new character was on the trading card.
Well, see, look at that. You either have a better
memory. And oddly enough, in 93, that was when DC did the Bloodline storyline with those parasite aliens that would, suck the back of your neck to get your spinal fluid. And then it turned people into heroes. And so there was another year. That year, 93, DC and Marvel were creating new characters in the annuals that year.
That was like when everybody was being creative, Barely remember those days, huh? Okay, so let me, I want to show 3 more covers. These are actually on my list here. This I had when I was a kid. Now, I don't know, do the giant sizes count as annuals? Because they really weren't. They were kind of their own thing, but since they were double-sized, I kind of felt like I could treat them as annuals in this.
I wouldn't call them annuals, but if you want to mention them as sort of an honorable mention for something, I would say that's okay for something like this, because they weren't monthly, they weren't even bi-monthly. They were, just specials that came out once in a great while. And
right. But I remember seeing this and going, oh my gosh, Morbius and the Man-Wolf and Spider-Man fighting both these guys. Look at, they're just ripping his, what a great cover. I was like, I had to have this. So, this is one I remember as a kid being like really, really cool. And Gil Kane on the inside. I think Mike Esposito inked him.
Yep.
Yeah, Henry Jeremick is like, is this Gil Kane in the interiors? It is. But anyway, I won't linger on this simply because, and I think that I'm almost dead certain that's Romita and the inks on the cover. So you got Gil Kane inked by Romita on the cover, then Gil Kane on the inside. Yeah, see, this is Marcus Killigrew brought a good point, because when I was growing up, and that was my problem with this whole topic this week, was that in the 70s when I was reading, they weren't doing annuals, they were doing giant sizes, but they weren't regular. Like they'd come out every 6 months for a while. There wasn't every annual. So it's kind of a weird thing. So they still were doing annuals in the 70s, just not as prolific in the 60s, and then back in the 80s they brought them back in full force. Because
if you look at our background material here, that Hulk annual I have up there, that is from the 70s. That is a 70s annual. So they were making them in the 70s, just not quite as prolifically. And I guess maybe that's how they kind of sort of balance it out. Like, we're not doing as many annuals, let's do these giant size specials.
Right. So that's why I felt like, well, I can use some giant sizes, because to me those kind of were annuals for me. Now I'm bringing this one up. This is tied for my favorite, and I'll show the last one will be I guess probably my top one. But I picked this one up as a little kid, right? Well, I was 12, whatever. And this is the issue. Okay, first of all, in the Avengers, there was this romantic triangle going on between the Swordsman, Mantis, and the Vision. Now, Vision was involved with Scarlet Witch. But Mantis was she was kind of like the bad girl of the Avengers, and she was always trying to steal the Vision from Scarlet Witch. Although you're never really sure, did she really love the Vision, or was she just doing it as competition with Scarlet Witch? But then you had the Swordsman, who was just in love with Mantis, right? And she would always just kind of, push him aside and all this kind of stuff. So in this issue, This is the issue where Swordsman dies, like it was either saving her or the Avengers. I can't remember exactly, but he sacrificed and died. And Mantis is holding him, in her arms and weeping and, oh, but I really always loved you and I'm so sorry. But it was too late. He was gone. And it was like such an emotional thing to read as a 12-year-old kid. You're like, oh, wiping back the tears. But so this had an incredible lasting memory on me.
Never did have much luck with. Well, Mantis never did have much luck with men. She couldn't take the vision from Scarlet Witch. The Swordsman died. She had her fling with the Silver Surfer, but then she dies. And so I mean, she never really had much luck with the men in her life.
Yeah, like a guy that she was after. The first guy was an android, so it's kind of like, come on. The second one died, and then the third one, she ended up dying. It's talk about, tragic. Just chick should have been staying away from any sort of relationship, I think. Yeah, there it is. Dojo Kun said Mantis would always friend zone the Swordsman. Swordsman simping. Yeah, so this issue, whether it's technically an annual or not, really sort of burned itself into my memory as a kid, and I've never forgotten it. I don't currently own it, but I should get a copy of this just because of that fact. It was sort of a landmark book in my childhood reading. All right, here we go. Now this was sort of brought up earlier in the chat, but I will have a disagreement. I can't remember who brought it up, but we will. I'm sure he will chime in. Okay, this is the companion second part of the Avengers 7 annual, and that's who was it in the chat that brought up the Avengers annual number 7 as being their like all-time favorite annual, and that it was the best ever. The conclusion to the storyline where they bring Spider-Man in. Now, this is drawn by Starlin as well. Now, I'm trying to remember, did he write this or not? I can't remember if probably was Bill Mantlo, right, that wrote it, but I don't know if off the top of my head. I'll bet Marcus Killigrew knows.
I think it was Starlin, because he did all this cosmic stuff in the 70s at Marvel. He did most of those cosmic stories.
Yeah, you're right. He probably would have had to rewrite it, because it was this was the death of Thanos and sort of Warlock was it Warlock or Captain Marvel? Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting. Warlock. No, it was Warlock. It was Warlock, wasn't it?
Yeah, Warlock.
Yeah, Warlock, because he took Thanos into his soul gem at the end. Spoilers. But this had this great panel with the opening page splash was Peter Parker laying in bed, kind of in this like, fever dreaming of the cosmos and all this kind of stuff. And you wouldn't think that was a great opening shot, but it was, and it was tremendous. And, Starlin, this is Starlin at his best. And so Spider-Man gets pulled into this cosmic affair with the Thing, and they end up being key components in bringing down Thanos, who was just wreaking havoc in the annual before and Avengers annual number 7, which sets this up. And how often they did do that? I mean, this was 77. So how often did they do that? I mean, it became a regular thing, like with Atlantis Attacks and other annuals, where they would start like this big crossover huge event in the annuals. But this, to my mind, was the first time they took a major thing like Thanos, the death of Thanos, and it was like across 2 annuals. So you had to buy the annuals to read like an extremely important story, which they didn't do very often.
Skull Gnasher jogs your memory for you, Aaron, right there. Skull Gnasher.
Yeah, Warlock died in the Avengers annual, but he came out of the Soul Gem and turned Thanos to stone. That's it.
Yep.
Right. So he died in the Avengers annual, but then came back, and I remember that great shot of Thanos turned to stone. And I think, wasn't there like a tear rolling out his eye or something, because, at the end of that? But that was, this is one I remember just seeing this on the stand, of course, I was a huge Spider-Man guy, right? I had bought the Avengers Annual 7, and I could not wait for this. And then when you saw that Spider-Man was in it, and it was the second part of this, and you're just like, it was so epic, or at least it felt so epic when I was a kid reading this thing. And there's nothing better than
Snake Oiler calls it on how this would be handled if it was done today.
Yeah, this would have been a miniseries. Oh yeah, definitely. That's the great thing about older books is it wasn't so much a cash grab. I mean, they obviously were always interested in selling as many books as they could, but you would get these storylines that were crammed into 2 issues, and it felt like you got a 4-issue miniseries because there was so much going on. There was a great 2-parter in the Avengers where I think it was it Graviton or Count? No, it was Count Nefarious, I think.
Count Nefaria.
Count Nefaria, there you are. And he beat the crap out of the Avengers in the first issue. Like they're all laying there, you assume they're dead, right? But Thor wasn't there and the Vision wasn't there, the 2 strongest Avengers, right? Well, they show up in the next issue and, of course, kick his butt and save the day. But I remembered that as a kid going, that was such an epic story. I was thinking it was 3 or 4 issues. And I went back and checked and it was only 2. They set the thing up. They had him battle the Avengers. They all looked dead. And that was all in 1 issue. And then, of course, the Thor and Vision showing up to kick his butt was the whole second issue. And you got more bang for your buck back in the day. I mean, let's be honest. What's this? It says, Aaron, they don't try for a cash grab today, but that's because of lack of quality. That's right. They haven't figured out how to do a cash grab because they can't offer anything that's worth buying. Cam says, I knew where every spinner rack was in a 5-mile radius of my house. I had to hit them all. Oh my goodness. I was talking to Andy Smith last night or night before. He was just did this impromptu stream late at night. And speaking of spinner racks, I don't know if, you're younger than me, so I think Charlton Comics were gone by the time you were probably getting into comics. But
yeah, didn't see any Charlton.
I never saw Charlton Comics on spinner racks, or very rarely. Every once in a while, 1 issue of something would show up, maybe an issue of Hot Wheels or whatever. But it was always dominated by Marvel and DC, and all the smaller companies at that time, which would have been Charlton, not Valiant, but Gold Key, all these different, there was one other one, Archie. None of that stuff ever showed up in spinner racks that I recall. It was always Marvel and DC with an occasional bizarre, like E-Man showed up on the spinner rack, maybe because it was a superhero title. And, but I just found that kind of bizarre. So it was like my point being that if you had to drive around or ride your bike around to different stores, different spinner racks, because sometimes 7-Eleven might have certain things that, the Plaid Pantry or whatever would have a different, some different books in there that weren't in the other store. So it took me a long, long time to figure out that the books.
Eric S. hits up on an annual that we didn't speak on, which a lot of people consider a modern classic.
Is that the Alan Moore one?
Yes, the Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons one, where Superman has that thing on his chest that lets him believe, puts him in like a idealized world. Mongol puts it on him, and then of course at the end Superman rejects it and he puts it on Mongol, and then Mongol's lost in his dream. Yes,
that was
Batman guest stars in it and stuff. Yeah,
they did an animated episode of that in the Superman cartoon show. They did that because I didn't read it at first. I saw it on the cartoon show, and I realized that it was actually a story.
Alan Moore doing Superman.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some trades of Alan Moore's Superman stuff over here because everybody said, "Oh, they're the greatest Superman stories ever written," and of course, I haven't read them yet, but they're sitting over there. Maybe someday.
Eric says the comic was better than the animated.
Yeah. I want to read it now, was this? The only certain stores had the room to carry the Magical Treasury comics. I would find those in like department stores in the magazine section. They would have them because they had those old style wooden displays, right, where they'd stick the magazines in them, and down at the bottom they'd always have the Treasury edition stacked.
That's where I got my Treasury edition GI Joe comic from. Was in a store like that. Yep.
Yeah, Kmart, as I recall, was where we used to go, and they would have all those Treasury editions. They didn't have comics; they'd have those bags. They had like a table set up that had those 3 comics.
Well, no, what they would do, Kmart would have one. They would have the Treasury editions, or they would have those 3-packs of comics. That's what they didn't have individual issues. It was either the 3-pack or a Treasury edition. And
that's what I was trying to say is that I remember seeing OMAC. Some of that Kirby DC stuff were jammed into those three book bags. And I remember somebody had gone by and ripped them open. So I was thumbing through OMAC, and I was a little kid because I was 74. So I was like maybe 9 or 10 years old. And I was looking through that, and that stuff just freaked me out. It's like I couldn't figure out what was going on. And because they had all those robot people in those boxes, and they were all in body parts. It was just like a weird Alfred Hitchcock thing. And I was just it's freaking me out. It took me years to have enough courage to actually buy OMAC #1 and go back and check it out with that cool
Dojin Kun Comics brings up Teen Titans Annual 2. I've read it. I mean, it's a good story, but I mean, it's not among my favorites.
But, it's subjective. Everybody's got their own favorites. And so we get to be subjective on our show and pick the ones we like. And you guys can badmouth us all you like, but it's not going to change my mind. Mark Penguin says, I would buy those 3-packs at Kmart all the time and use Sega Genesis games for $8 that were in the plastic bag with the instruction manuals too, with no box. Hey, man, you did what your budget allowed you to do, right? And the fact that my family was shopping at Kmart should give you a pretty good idea where we were at financially.
It was either Kmart or a Plaid Pantry.
Plaid Pantry was like that. They were, I don't know if they were a national chain or not, but they were like a 7-Eleven, but they were, convenience. What do they call those places? Convenience stores or,
convenience stores. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would locate them like the guy said earlier in the chat that, and get on your bike and, hit all those stores and manage to get across 4 lanes of traffic without getting run over. And, but I think I was telling this and we got sidetracked, but it took me till I was about 14 or 15 years old. I realized that the comics came in on Wednesdays to 7-Eleven every Wednesday, and they'd be in those big bundles. Right. And so I would go in and I talked to the lady that ran the store and said, hey, I want first look at those books before you put them on the spinner rack and get them all bent up. So I would be there Wednesday after school every week.
So even as a child, Aaron Lopresti was a comic book condition snob.
I was. Dude, once I discovered the price guide in 1976, I was like, these things have value. I got to take care of them. So I still read them, but I just, was careful. That's all. I think that's totally legit. But anyway, so there you have it. Those are our annuals that are favorites and are memorable ones from time gone by. But
hopefully you brought some ones you guys hadn't seen before, and now you're interested. Now you can go out to your back issues and check some of those out.
Exactly. But let's take a look at some original art that I'm guessing may just tie into annuals. I don't know. We'll see.
It might.
Let's take a look at what James brought along with him. Boom, there you go. Deathlock Annual 2, huh?
Yep, Annual number 2. And just so you guys can see right here, here's the actual book itself.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me blow you up. Hang on a second here. There you go.
This is the actual book itself. You can see it's personalized to by inker Sam Della Rosa, who I bought this page from. He even made sure to include the trading card of the character that's introduced it in. And this is 1990. This is the same year as your Darkhawk Annual, the one with the introducing a new character. This one called the Tracer. But
the Tracer.
But the art Tracer. Here, the Tracer. It has nothing to do with comic book inking, folks.
Hang on, let me bring back the picture here.
But the page here, this is not from the main story. This is one of the backup features. It's called like a day in the life type of thing, and just a scene here of this is not the original Deathlock. It was the one that created in the 90s, the new Deathlock basically. And he was a pacifist, and now he's a cyborg with weapons and stuff. And so here he is. He's doing a little target shooting of some buoy out there in the ocean, and he's just talking about how, like, as a pacifist, I never would have thought that I'd have so much fun doing target shooting, but then you can see here his heavy body breaks through the boardwalk there, and and the kids go running off scared. Oh God, he's scary. He's so big and mean, and he's got a gun. It's hilarious. I was like, but this is done by artist Kirk Jarvinen, who, if any guys maybe don't know who he is, his two biggest claim to fame are he did this great cover to Wolverine number 47 that everybody seemed to love, and he also did the miniseries Aquaman Time and Tide with Peter David, which was right before the 94 series that Peter David did. It was sort of like retelling Aquaman's origins. And here he is with Sam De La Rosa inking. And just a fun little page, the kind of thing in an annual that they would do later on, the backup stories, that you wouldn't fit in anywhere else. You couldn't put it in a regular series. You couldn't put it in a mini series. So you had this little like 8-pager story or whatever. I will throw it in the back of an annual, and that's what they did. And just a fun little page from an artist who at the time was trying to work his way up. And this is from 1993, so this is early.
Is that Zipatone? Is that Zipatone on those?
Yes, it is.
Circular panels. Nothing like Zipatone turning brown. The good.
Yeah.
You can always count on that. But always cool. It's cool when you have originals that have like the zip and stuff on them that you don't. Was this was the regular series for Deathlock? That was Dennis Cowan, right?
Yes, the Dennis Cowan series.
Off of? Yeah.
Yep, the annuals from that series. Yes.
Very cool.
It's just a fun little story, and if you scroll on over, you can see the full published version here in color,
in living color, no less. Hang on a second here.
Well, since we're online, it'd be in digital color.
That's right, in digital, not indigenous, but in digital color. There it is.
Very cool. There it is. It's just a fun little scene. Just no big explosions, no action out the wazoo, no deep emotional trauma scene, or a big reveal of some kind. No, just a day in the life. Him doing some target practice, and then because he's so heavy, he puts his foot through the boardwalk.
Scares little kids. Look at how simple the coloring was back in the day.
Yep. I like that, and I like that coloring. Again, this is the kind of coloring that says comic books to me. Whereas the stuff they do now, it's they're almost trying to make like it's fine art. It's so painterly. It's so and some of that's nice, but give me this any day of the week. I love the classic comic coloring, the 4-color process.
Well, and there was a lot. Some people didn't do it great. Other people did it really, really well. Like Marie Severin was just terrific at it. Having a very limited palette, but still making it, something like really, really good. And she always did a terrific job, I thought. Got a Troy Bisbin for $5, says in Aloha/Beaverton. That was my stomping grounds as well. Beaverton, grew up there. It was Circle K. Then I discovered Pegasus Books. There was a plaid pantry there in Beaverton off Farmington Road that I used to go to, ride my bike to. And then there was another, it wasn't plaid pantry, I can't remember, like a Minute Mart or something that was on the other side on Allen Boulevard, right near Murray, that I would always go to on Wednesdays. That's when I discovered the Wednesday delivery thing and had a agreement with the lady that worked there on Wednesdays. But yeah, I'd be riding my bike over there. And the Pegasus bookstore opened up. That was Things from Another World is what it became. And of course, those are owned by Mike Richardson, who runs Dark Horse and used to own Dark Horse, but apparently sold out to a larger Chinese corporation.
Well, I guess I got to kind of agree with Mike Wilson Art over here. That's I definitely can't disagree with that sentiment.
Yeah, where are you, Mike? Let me get caught up here. I'll join you. But thank you for the $5, Troy. I remember those days fondly. All right, how Mike Wilson went right here.
Yep.
Yeah, when everything is special, nothing is special. Oh, that was wasn't that from The Incredibles? Except it was when everyone's super, or maybe that's what he said. When everyone's special, then no one will be, or something like that. Pork Hunt says, I hate digital coloring. I do too most of the time, but there are a couple of guys that are really, really good. Brad Anderson comes to mind, is terrific.
Well, for me, it's like I can think of very few instances where digital coloring improves anything. That's the real problem with it. It's like it's not.
Right.
If it improved the work, if you looked at a page like this and then it colored it digitally, and it's like, oh wow, it looks so much different, so much better. Yeah, I might have a problem. But like I look at this and I look at the digital, I'm like, yeah, it's not adding anything, guys. And if anything, it takes away in some cases. And so that's why I just say, just give me the old style.
Yeah. Well, the old style, the black and white line work carried the day, right? Because the colors never covered up the line work, where they can now. People color too dark, too saturated, and the coloring becomes the thing. And if it's really great coloring, fine. But if it isn't, it can ruin the book. And oftentimes that happens, or makes it less. Rich Buckler sued Marvel over Deathlock, but he apparently didn't win. Who was it that sued over Ghost Rider? It wasn't Bill Mantlo. It was
no, it was it
Gary? Was it Gary Friedrich?
Gary Friedrich. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's really tough because.
Well, it's especially tough now since Marvel is owned by Disney. We all know how litigious they are.
That's right. And you don't. No one has enough money to compete with Disney, but we all signed those contracts, those freelancer contracts, where basically you just work for hire, and whatever you come up with, they take, and that's the way it goes. And so it's, even though it's not fair, it's pretty hard to argue in court that, well, yeah, okay, I willingly signed this, but I didn't realize this was going to become a big thing, and I was going to get cut out.
Skipling Vaughn, he comes in with it. Yep, that's exactly how I feel.
Flat coloring is still the best for comic book artwork. I agree. Who knows? Maybe going forward, I will, because I've had some trouble securing colorists on my latest Wraith of God project. And it's like, this isn't worth the headache, man. I'll just do it myself. And my color sense is not as simple as what we're seeing here in Deathlock, but it's not, I'm not an elaborate renderer when it comes to coloring.
Well, Leg Kick makes an interesting point right here about why we see so much more digital coloring now.
Yeah, that's true in some instances, in a lot of instances. Also, a bigger problem is you get colorists that are proficient at Photoshop but aren't necessarily really good colorists. They just know how to use the tools. So, most people, that's the problem. It's kind of like you keep going down the food chain, is that if you're a really good artist, you're probably going to end up being a penciler, right? If you're a pretty good artist, but maybe not fast enough or just not quite good enough, you probably end up being an inker, right? And then if you're a colorist, it's probably you can't pencil and you probably can't ink. So now you're going to do the coloring. And that's not, I'm not saying that's true of everybody. I'm not just wholesale ripping on colorists. Okay. But I'm just saying that is what happens sometimes. And then you've got guys that can really use Photoshop effectively, but they don't have really good color sense, or they don't really understand values and things like that.
Yeah.
And then you can get a comic book screwed up really easily.
Jeff but enough about coloring, Aaron. What art do you have for us today?
Oh, what art do I have you might say, Aaron, are you going to pull something out of your collection, or are you going to go and show us something that you've drawn? Well, I'm going to show you something I've drawn. What a shock, right?
A piece by your favorite artist.
That's right, me. But the reason I picked this is because this is the only annual artwork that's worth a darn that I have. Now, this is from Damage, annual number 1. Okay, so I did this first before I took over the Damage series. And as I talked about in other streams before, the way that we worked script-wise on these, where I would get a Marvel plot like the good old days, and then a lot of times it would say fight scene for 6 pages, and that was all it would say. And then I had to come up and, you know, choreograph a fight scene. So I'm particularly proud of this one. They're in this bunker, right? And he's fighting these 3 sort of mutant monsters that the military has created.
Is he force feeding him shells?
Yeah, yes. He took rockets out of this box that got broken open, or missiles, jammed them in the guy's mouth, then punched him in the face, and his head blew up.
Oh my God.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is all me, baby. I came up with this because you're sitting there trying to think of interesting ways, you know, to fight scenes and things like that. And I just saw John Wick 4 last night, and I was really amazed by the creative way they figured out to do like gun scenes and killing people, because it's just carnage the whole movie. But you have to do something more interesting than just, you know, shooting a guy all the time. And this is kind of what I went for here was, wouldn't it be funny if, and that's exactly what I did. So he shoves the bomb or the missiles in his mouth, or the little, you know, grenade things in his mouth, and then has one in his fist and punches him in the face as hard as he can. And the whole thing blows the guy's head off. So yeah, that, ladies and gentlemen,
Ellie Minogue kind of covers what that is right there. He goes, "That's brutal."
That's comics at its finest right there, ladies and gentlemen. And look at that Neil Adams shot from low angle. You know, that's how Neil would, you know, often draw stuff, is, you know, from behind the character to low angle or something. So that's kind of the stuff I picked up from Neil Adams. But anyway, here's another page from it. And it was just great because it was basically one huge fight scene with the Damage fighting these big monsters, and a lot of power, speed lines and power lines and massive punches. And
I loved how you do the border of the panel there, where it's all broken up, like it actually, that's how you can actually feel part of the punch in that.
Thank you. That's what I was going for. And some terrific inks by Matt Ryan. Of course, he's tremendous. You look at the control on that. That's all brush work. I mean, he's just really, really good. But yeah, this was just a absolute blast to work on. And it was my favorite annual to at least work on. And like I said, I did do the Dream Killer one with Darkhawk. But this is one that I'm actually, you know, look back at the artwork and go, this is pretty good. So I got to contribute.
Well, I mean,
a lot of storytelling.
This has one of your favorite inkers inking you, Matt Ryan.
Yes.
You said like probably one of your best inkers. Who was did the Darkhawk? You know, wasn't that Andy Mushininsky who did you on the Darkhawk annual?
I have no idea. I honestly have to go back and look at the comic. That sounds familiar, so that's probably true. But I mean, in fairness, I wasn't a great penciler at that period of time either. So it's like, you know, I was just breaking in, figuring things out. So, you know, you get a young artist and a young inker, or, you know, maybe even an old pro who's just like burning through the job, and you're not going to get, you know, a memorable piece of artwork. But later in my career, as we see here, I, you know, did some decent stuff.
Yeah, ramming rockets down throats and blowing up heads.
Comics code violation, says Henry Jeremy.
I don't think I would have passed the comics code back in the day.
No, it blew his mind. Spoilers. Oh my goodness. Well, if you want to just read a comic book that just has monsters just beating the crap out of each other, go pick up that Damage Annual #1. I'm sure it's dirt cheap on eBay. But anyway, guys, appreciating the layout. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Nighthawk. Porkhunt says, Aaron Lepresti, what are you saying? You weren't a great artist? Sledge was the best looking Ultraverse title. Well, thank you. That was the first, or what I feel like first professional work I ever did in my career. At Marvel, I was just, the weight of expectation and pressure to a young artist, I couldn't handle it. You know, so I was choking jobs. I was better than what I was showing at Marvel. And then when I went to Malibu, and they just kind of said, hey, Aaron, do whatever, man. We trust you. And then I was able to finally start doing what I considered was professional quality work on Sludge.
Look what you've gotten started, Aaron. Look at Snake Oiler. Look what you've gotten started with that Damage page.
could have shoved it down his pants and kicked him in the that I might not have got away with. I don't know. Maybe I would have. Maybe I would. That's pretty funny. That would have been classic. Thank you, Snake Oiler. I'm going to write that down. Maybe in the future I'll be able to use something like that. And I probably won't give you credit. So, what was this? What you didn't like the? No, I did. I'm just saying that he's talking about the last thing one of the last things I did for DC was this Justice League Annual that sort of wrapped up a story arc that I was doing. I was filling in for Doug Mankey for like 3 or 4 issues, and then we sort of tied that all together at the end of the Justice League Annual that I did. But I honestly don't like it as much as the Damage Annual, just because the Damage Annual was just big hulkish monsters beating the crap out of each other for like 20 pages. So, but thank you for remembering.
If ever there was a story meant for Aaron Lopresti, I think that was the one.
Yes, exactly. Well, and so was Damage. That's why I was so ticked off that they came in and basically, I think on issue 9, I took over and they'd already had 3 artists before me. And I was like, why didn't you just get me to start this? You know, why are you calling me on issue 9 saying this book's in the tank? Do you think you can save it? When they could have just given it to me from the very beginning. So anyway, I can whine and complain all night long. I get plenty of those types of stories. Okay. Speaking of stories, surely you have a con story, James, you'd like to share with us.
Okay, this is 2005, the Portland Comic Con, the second Genesis show. I went there.
Oh, yeah. I love those. Wait a minute, was this wasn't at the Masonic Temple? This is in the Coliseum, right?
Yeah, the underneath in the dungeon underneath the dome. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And
this is where I first met artist Kirk Jarvinen. It was at that show. He was there. Him and his lovely wife. They were there, and we went up and met him. I talked with him, and funnily enough, he didn't have a long line of people at his table.
Amazing. What?
So we got to spend some time talking, and we found out, me and him, we share a lot of common interests, like with the stuff we grew up watching in pop culture and stuff. He remembered some stuff like even before me, like he told me about like Land of the Lost. He grew up watching that as a kid. He goes, "Oh, I love that show," and all this stuff that we talked about. And he said something to me that really stuck with me. And he goes, "I'm glad I grew up when I did, so I could experience the stuff that I did." And that's how I kind of feel too. Is like, because I look at today and these kids today, I'm like, they have no idea what they're missing out on. They've had stuff taken from them. They don't even realize it. And I'm glad I grew up in like the 80s and I got to see all this cool stuff and be a part of all this cool stuff. And, and so we really kind of bonded there. And, because I said, as the next year he was at the Emerald City show with the wife, and then they were getting a little tipsy and just talking metal all night long, metal music. So, but I was there, and I was working at the collectible shop in town here at the time, and the owner has a sketchbook, which he has either artists do a sketch in, or he would have sometimes like sports players would come to the store and do signing sessions, and he'd have them sign in the book. And so when he saw I was going to the show, he asked me would I take it and get something for him. Like, let's get a sketch or something. It's like, all right, I'll see what I can do. And while I was talking with Kirk, I'm like, hey, could you do a sketch for my boss, in his book here? Because, he sent me here with this. And if Aaron brings up the picture here, we can show you what it is Kirk.
Oh, that's right.
Kirk did for me, for my boss, which kind of plays again to what he said is how he's glad he grew up when he did, so he got to see so much cool stuff. And here it is. We got Batman by Kirk Jarvinen, but not just any Batman, the Adam West Batman. And he even threw in I love that he threw in that word bubble with their time to Batusi, old chum. I just love that.
My goodness. And the funny thing is, I almost said Burt Ward, but Adam West, he was at every con for a period of time there in the 90s. I mean, he was literally anywhere I went, he was there. So this is kind of funny that, in fact, I'll share a little tidbit about it.
Is correct. Yes, Kirk did. He did Thor for his wedding.
Oh my goodness.
He did.
I really, Now, see, as big of a comic book geek as I am, I would never go that far. I mean, there's people that like, was it Bogdanovich? Not or Bogdanov, excuse me. Did he name his kids like after Superman? Like one of them's what's Superman's real name? Kal-El, right?
Kal-El.
I'm not sure if it was John Bogdanov or one of the, but I think it was actually named his kid Kal-El. And I'm like, I mean, I love
Why
comics.
would you do that?
I don't know.
Kid has to live with that forever now.
I know. But it's like, and I don't know that I would dress as Thor at my wedding either. Or Spider-Man or something. I don't think my wife would have appreciated it.
So, I mean, if anyone could probably pull it off, I mean, he probably would have won.
I guess that's true. But yeah, I would, my wife would probably, and Shelley's pretty tolerant of this kind of stuff, as most of you know. Obviously, she's been married to me for 30 years, but I don't think I could have got away with dressing up as a superhero for our wedding. I think that
I couldn't have either.
I don't think that
Mike Wilson Art is correct. Mike Wilson Art is absolutely correct.
Everything happened in the 80s. Well,
everything worth thinking of. Yes, it all happened in the 80s, folks.
Yeah, it was a great decade in a lot of ways. The Geekies, he said Nick Cage did it, and Henry Jeremick agrees that Nick Cage. Who'd he dress up as at his wedding?
And my wife here, she's got more info for you.
His wife. Oh well. His wife is totally on board then. If he's dressing up like Thor and she's dressing up like Sif, then I guess, I guess if your wife's on board, man, go for it, right? It was acceptable in the 80s, says Geek Avenger. Was it really, though? Well, since you have Adam West up here. So I was at the guy that put on the Mid-Ohio Con, I can't remember his name, which used to be a pretty popular Midwestern convention. And he was trying to branch out. And so he went to do a show in Louisiana and in New Orleans. And Paul and Linda Ryan were going. And so Shelley and I went, and we actually stayed in their timeshare with them. And oh my gosh, if you want to just go to someplace to eat, New Orleans is the spot. Holy crap.
What my wife told me. She's been to New Orleans. She was in New Orleans before Katrina hit. She was in there like 2 years before that. And she just said the food there is just exquisite.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And also you can get giant gator heads in novelty shops, which I have back there. But anyway, that I did pick up while I was in Louisiana. So we're at this show, and the show was dead for the most part, right? It was a 2-day show or something like that. And it was the first show in New Orleans, and there was just no action. But they had celebrity guests there, like the guy Mike TV from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was there. I mean, the original one, right? Mike TV was there, and there was people like that, like some obscure TV personalities, right? They would always do the rounds, especially in the 90s at cons, to try and make some bucks, And Adam West was there. And I'm not kidding. I probably been to 10 conventions that Adam West was a guest at. I mean, he was at every show. And so he was bored because there was nothing going on, as most of us were. And so he would, he just would walk around the con and we'd go, oh, hey, and wave or whatever. And so he just happened to be walking by our table, out in front of our table. So I got to witness this. This guy comes running up to him with his little kid. And you never do this with little kids. This is the lesson you must know. Never do this with little kids. He runs up to him and he goes, oh, Mr. West, blah, blah, blah. I'm a big fan of yours. And blah, he goes, and he grabs his kid and he goes, son, look, it's Batman. And the kid, he was like 4 or 5 years old, had no clue who it was, and was just looked at him and then just turned and walked away. You should have seen the scowl on Adam West's face. It was like, There's nothing and then the parents like super apologetic, and because he was like, no, he's not Batman, because he probably saw the Michael Keaton Batman, right, or whatever. And so you never
no,
do. I did.
Wow, something that's actually worse than being confused for Adam Hughes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just thankful I wasn't a part of it. However, not too much later, I took my son to a Portland show, the one you're talking about, and Uncle Owen from Star Wars was there. Okay, and he was in a wheelchair because he looked like Alec Guinness, because at this point we're in the 90s now, right? And that movie was in what, 77, filmed probably in 1976, released in 77. And he was like probably in his 50s at that point, right? So now we're talking 20 years later. This guy is in his late 70s, early 80s. And we had seen him the day before. We had gone on a brunch cruise with him. We got to talk to him quite a bit, Shelley and I. So I bring my son in there, and here's this old guy in a wheelchair, and I'm talking to him, and I grabbed Josh, and I'm like, Josh, look, it's Uncle Owen from Star Wars. And he's just like, huh? Who? He didn't recognize him, and it's just, and I'm like, oh, why did I do that? So I'm like pushing my kid away, just going, sorry, Uncle Owen. I can't remember the actor's name off the top of my head, but I was just like, now another celebrity hates me because I, embarrassed myself and embarrassed him, because my son was just like,
that's the Aaron Lepresti charm, is you just tick off everybody you meet.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But so you have to be careful not to get caught up in that and taking your little kids in front of old celebrities, that are 20 years older than the movie that they originally saw him in. And I don't even know if Josh was like, it registered with him who Uncle Owen was. I was like, and I was trying to explain to him, Luke Skywalker's uncle on Tatooine. And he's just like, I was like, forget it, and you're apologizing. Sorry, he's young, but yeah, he loved the movie and thought, and so anyway, there you go. There's my 2-layered con story that, of course, ends up with me looking like an ass, as it usually does. But I always have good intentions, James. I start with good intentions, and they just always go south.
Well, your old man kind of hits you up with how Adam West is revered nowadays versus our generation.
It was so funny because Adam West really cared, and this kid really didn't care. And it was like he was so annoyed. It was the expression on his face was really funny as I sat from afar watching. Oh my goodness! But
well, I'll tell you, the Family Guy stuff. I did love Adam West on Family Guy. He made the show more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I remember this one episode with him, and he's going to go to the bathroom, and it says one says men, and another says women, and another says Adam West, and he goes to turn to the Adam West, and he goes, no, that's what they would expect, and then he turns and goes to the men's room. And it's like, that's why we love Adam West. He can make fun of himself. He can laugh at himself.
Well, he wasn't laughing at himself at this convention. Oh, look at this. It says, Porkhunt says, Aaron, if Uncle Owen had been dressed as a smoking skeleton, your son would have known who he was. He was probably only a few years away from that at that point. Oh, he was a good guy, though. He had a lot of stories about, when we talked to him on the brunch cruise the day before the show, he said he lived in a houseboat on the Thames in England for years, and, talked about different stages of his career and acting and people. It was really interesting to talk to. And then, of course, I had to cap off the weekend by embarrassing myself and him with my son who didn't recognize him. But, oh, well. But he was a good guy. I assume he's gone now because,
but
like
here's
I said,
the real question: is your son embarrassed by that story now, or does he just still not care?
He probably doesn't even remember. That's the thing. I mean, he was literally.
He doesn't remember.
Can't remember.
That happened. What are you talking
I don't know what
Dad?
you're talking about. I'm going to ask him because I'm gonna ask him about that and see if he does remember that. No, I hadn't thought about it for a while, but oh man. But we did sit next to Erin Gray one time, the beautiful and talented Erin Gray. And Shelley and her chatted up the whole show. I didn't have any action at my table, but Erin Gray was getting
the star there. Erin was talking to the star. That's why.
Yeah, well, Shelley just butted right in. She was sitting on the side between me and Erin Gray, and I had met Erin Gray and talked to her at Motor City Con before. So it was kind of like, hey, how's it going? You know, we met at Motor City Con, blah, blah, blah. That's my wife, Shelley. Oh, hi, Shelley. Chat away. And it was like, that was the end of my, they were best buds by the end of the show. So anyway.
Well, like I said, Aaron, we all know who the star is in the family. That's just how it is. You just have to accept it.
That's right. Everybody remembers Shelley. It sounds like a sitcom from the 80s, right? Everyone remembers Shelley. You know, so anyway, that's our show pretty much for today, but I would like to call everybody's attention to a couple of things before we
first of all, this.
Look at that Wraith of God t-shirts. I do actually, have some of those left if anybody's interested in getting the size that I have in stock, which is probably medium, large, extra large.
All you who do not have the first Wraith of God book, you knuckleheads, you still have time left. Hurry up and get on the Second Chance campaign and stop being a knucklehead. That's back the book today.
That's right. It's only like 4 days left on the campaign. You'll find the link in the description of this video, and also the follow-up, the mega hit follow-up, Wraith of God Blood Hunters, is also the link to that campaign's in the link is in the description of this campaign. The link is, and I'll just let you know as a quick update. I got page 48 penciled on the drafting table right now. It's a 53-page story, so I'm almost done with the Wraith of God story. Then, of course, I have the backups to finish, Garbage Man.
Well, with the pages you have done for the backups, plus this, you're already over halfway done with the book.
Oh, I'm way over halfway done, yeah. So it's exciting times. We're getting to that point where we're going to be starting looking at publication dates and everything, so make sure you back that. It's an exciting thing. And, of course, James, there's links to your media accounts. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you.
Page, all the information about the artists I work with and stuff like that. Some fun stuff there. We got the art gallery where you can buy some great art from some of my artists. Lots of great stuff there. Got over 1,000 pieces up right now, guys. All very affordable. All very very different styles and different types. So whatever you like, I probably got something to fit it. On top of that, we got my YouTube channel, and go over there and subscribe. And right on my front page, right at the very top, I got a playlist of all the past comic art convos. So if you've missed one, you can go check those out. Also, check out the new thing I do with Pops that's right beneath it. It's called Why Is It Great? Me and Pops each take a book from the past that we love. We talk about it. We show you why these are great issues and why you should have them in your collection. So that's a lot of fun stuff. And next show, folks, next comic art convo, May 27th. It's going to be Memorial Day weekend, and I thought about this. What we're going to do.
Okay.
Our favorite crossover comics. Now, we did one last year where we recreated the crossovers that never happened.
Right. That was a good one.
Did happen, and these are our favorite ones that they've done. So that's going to be our favorite crossover comics. Now, crossovers, again, as you know, a team up is if they're from the same universe. Batman and Superman, that's a team up. Batman and Spider-Man, that's a crossover.
Oh, hang on a second now. So you're talking, does it have to be company crossover? So like if the X-Men appeared in the FF, that you don't consider that a crossover?
That's not a crossover, that's a team up because they're in the same universe. Crossovers is when the two universes come together.
Okay, so like Earth 1, Earth 2 would be a crossover.
Yeah, see that whole stuff of like that whole alternate reality stuff that gets it hinky. I just like keep it simple. If the characters are of the same universe or any variant thereof, that's not the same thing. So like the Earth 1, Earth 2 Justice Leagues, yeah, that's a team up. That's not a crossover because they're both Justice League, they're both DC. But Justice League and Avengers, that's a crossover because they're from completely different companies, completely different universes, completely different characters, all that. So.
All right.
Crossover.
That makes it a little more difficult, but we may have some overlap. We shall see. Anyway, everybody, hey, thank you guys for joining us this weekend. We couldn't do it if you didn't show up and make it happen. We had a great crowd today, over 100 views almost consistently through the entire show. That means the channel's growing. That means the show's growing. And that's awesome. We're glad you guys come back and enjoy doing it with us. We appreciate your comments, the super chats,
hey guys, if you can, maybe grab a link to this show, throw it out on some of your social medias. If you like the show, give it some love, show some people that, hey, you need to check out this show. Help us build this up, because the bigger we can make it, the better we can make it for you guys.
Excellent. And make sure you hit that like and subscribe, because that always helps as well. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Make sure you tune in to Aaron Live tomorrow night. I think Shelly will be joining me, and special guest star JC Vaughn, going to talk about all things Price Guide related, and also his new comic, Al Capone Vampire #2 is out. And so we'll talk to him about all that. Plus, we may be on the lookout for Bigfoot as usual. So thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Peace.
Hello.